Finance Committee meeting. I would like to call the meeting to order. So Ms. King, may we have a roll call, please?
Peggy Mueller-Aragon.
Here.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Here.
Barbara Peterson.
Here.
Crystal Tapia Romero. Josefina Dominguez.
Here.
Courtney Jackson.
Here.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Here. Community members may attend the APS Board of Education meetings in person at the Allison Bruce King Educational Complex here at 6400 Uptown Boulevard, or watch the live stream on the APS Board of Education YouTube channel. Our first item for consideration and action is adoption of the April 26, 2023 Finance Committee meeting agenda and approval of the March 29, 2023 Finance Committee meeting minutes.
I will move for adoption of the April 26, 2023 Finance Committee meeting agenda. But first, with the removal of 4C, the interfunction transfers for grant budget for 323, removal of 4E, the 2023 intrafunction transfers for non-categorical funds, and 4N, the archive security systems, and approval of the Finance Committee meeting minutes of March 29, 2023.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Do I have a roll call, please?
Peggy Mueller-Aragon.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes.
Barbara Peterson.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. So before we move on to our next is consideration for approval of the 2023 finance items on consent agenda, except that we'll start first with item C. So Board Member Mueller-Aragon, you had some questions on this one?
Right. I had some questions that came up after our question, some of our questions were answered. So didn't have time to get those answered. So and I'm not sure who would be able to answer this one, is when it came to the amount that was going to go to pay for the all program training for principals, and it said that it would be about $23,000 in total for each principal, and there were 10 right now, correct? 10 interns, I believe. So, and then it said a lot of that was going to be paid to the person who was subbing for them. So are they out for the whole spring semester? And then there's somebody who's subbing as administrator? I was just confused with that answer.
Board Member Mueller-Aragon, to my knowledge, the interns are out for the period when they have to attend the classes at UNM for their training to become better prepared leaders in our schools. I can follow up with program and provide you additional details on the exact amount of time these interns are to be out of schools.
And just kind of how that, Ms. Mayor, like how that money is like divvied up, if you know the 23,000, how much of it's going to go to paying substitute salaries. I thought that was interesting. And then how much was going, I'm assuming that they're getting some kind of a stipend as well, the principals themselves. So those kinds of questions. And then if I could, if there was anybody here that could answer this would be helpful. I just want to know how different this all program was than the PEDs, Principals Pursuing Excellence, and why we're not doing that, or we're not, and I don't know if we are or not. Maybe there are some that are part of that Principals Pursuing Excellence. And then also I know that Project Echo does a lot, is starting to do a lot more when it comes to education. And, that's funded. They have funding for that. So I'm just wondering if we're being wise about how we're spending our funds when it comes to, making our principals the best that they can possibly be. So if I could get answers to those questions, that would be wonderful. Just if there's other programs that might be of a high quality as well, that might be paid for by other funds and we could use it for something else. And then another question that kind of came up when it was I think it was at Highland, and it was the Avid professional development that they were going to go to in Dallas. So I saw that this was probably for one staff member because I think it was only $2,600. So I'm assuming that's paying for the training and for the travel. But then there was going to be 7 staff members. So are we going to see that money later, or have we already approved that possibly?
Board Member Mueller-Aragon, the money, there's two
Sure.
instances. The money might already be budgeted where it needs to be, and this is just the
Moving, the
additional
transferring.
funding
Okay.
because the travel costs these days are fluctuating so much that we have to move money pretty fast to accommodate travel.
Okay, and then just the same kind of question, is there other training, was this the only place that they were going to get this kind of training? Was there nothing in New Mexico, the same caliber or online? I'm just thinking about everybody's being careful with money and traveling and everything, so I just want to make sure.
Board Member Mueller-Aragon, to my knowledge, there is a cap on the number of travelers based on funding availability that can attend it from a school so as not to be so far away from school and out of the classroom if applicable. And in addition to that, I am aware that our AVID program is looking into applying to become a local AVID representative, and if that's the case, we will have other states and districts coming to us, and we will not travel so voluminously outside the state in looking for this type of training.
Because I saw an answer to the question that there was going to be 7 total staff members that were going to be going to this training. I think it's this summer. So if you could just find out for me, that'd be wonderful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this item? No, then I guess I would entertain a motion on this one.
I'll move for approval of the interfunction transfers for grant budget for the month of March 2023.
I'll second.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Peggy Mueller-Aragon,
No, just because I don't have all of the answers, though, if you could note that, please.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes.
Barbara Peterson,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. Okay, our next item is consideration approval. That's item E for transfers for all non-categorical funds. Board Member Mueller-Aragon, you had some questions on this?
And so on this one, and one of the questions that I had is what is going to be the total cost for the ERS contract services? I know we've seen it before, and on here it was like $575,000 it was going to be used, but can you tell me what the whole contract, what the cost for the whole contract is going to be?
Yes, Board Member Peggy Mueller-Aragon, the 575, it's actually phase 1 and some of phase 2. So there is a deep dive that ERS is doing currently into our data to be able to come up with a picture of how we fund, where we are, and then also conducting interviews with staff, and they'll be coming to talk to the board. So there's like a whole timeline. So this just covers the beginning. And once we are able to determine where we are and then make a determination of where we want to go, then that cost may fluctuate. So I can't give you the exact total until we know where we're at this time.
Okay, so does that make it, Ms. Apodaca, a little hard to like budget for that if you're not quite sure exactly how much, or even estimate what it might
Yes.
be?
The estimate that they had given us initially was about 750,000, but like I said, it was just an estimate because not going through phase 1 and some of phase 2, they couldn't determine what it was going to look like.
Okay, because this is like 3 years. So this 575 is phase 1. So this will kind of be for the planning for the first year, correct? and then the second year, and then the third year. So that's where we're not sure exactly what that
Exactly.
cost will be.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. I think that was the main question. And my apologies to you all, because I had written the question and wrote, I missed the 5 on there and probably got you guys all confused. Like, what, 75,000? I missed the 5 on the 5. I wish it was 75,000. I wish it was 75. Thank you.
Any other discussion? May I have a motion, please?
I will move for approval of fiscal year 2023 intra-function transfers for all non-categorical funds for the month of March 2023.
I'll second. This is Barbara.
Let's have a roll call, please.
Peggy Mueller Aragon.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez,
Yes.
Barbara Peterson,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. Our next item is item N, which is consideration for approval of district purchase or expenditure of 250,000 for archive security systems for schools. Discussion, Board Member Mueller Aragon.
Hang on one second.
And real quick, before you start, can you give the number of the page in the digital packet? So we're not,
Oh, it's
we have
on,
it.
mine doesn't show page number.
I think it's on 149.
Yes, thank
I
you.
had that written down, so.
Oh, I'm looking
Okay.
at the wrong thing.
And so where did this, who requested this? Was this coming from, APS police? Like what department requested these new, I think it's new servers, right? Security servers, correct, Dr. Bowman?
Correct.
Okay.
Chairwoman Mueller Aragon, I would defer that to Shel Marie, who is online.
Members of the board, Peggy Mueller Aragon. Yes, that was requested through the police department through technology. We help support them with all of their, most of their technology needs. So it was a dual request between technology and APSPD.
Okay. And so I think this is, when I am just looking, when I was kind of looking at some of the, rationale that you had for it, what it came really down to is that a lot of these servers are just old and new ones, right? I mean, that is the true justification. But then what I saw in here a lot was where we were talking, you all were talking about how important it was that improved attendance will help close the achievement gap. Student safety will improve the children's social emotional wellness, allowing them to learn in a safe and sound environment. And that just kind of like confused me because I think most kids have absolutely positively no idea what kind of servers that we use. And bottom line from what you're saying is that these servers were old.
So yes, they were old. But they were also, this is also part of the entire security package. So if we don't have our infrastructure in place, then our security and our safety of our students is not going to be there. This was approved by the PED. So it was partly because of requirements for PED, and then also they are old and they do need to be replaced.
Right. And I know that there was a big deal made about connectedness and relationships and making kids feel safer. And that the servers played a pivotal role, like you just said, in the security system infrastructure. But do they contribute to the kids' true sense of safety?
I think
There are
that-
several studies that say that they do contribute to their safety because it is part of the entire infrastructure. Our police monitor with these servers and these cameras that are at each schools, and students know that they're there.
I would also add that I think if you have, strong infrastructure at a school, the staff feels confident. So it sort of leads to all of that. So the students might not know what a server is, but our teachers definitely know about the infrastructure. The staff knows about the infrastructure. So I appreciate, the extra mile that you gave in terms of just the description of that. Although we are replacing, servers that are old, there's also importance of why we need to replace the servers to also create that balance. So is there any other discussion?
I mean, I would just like for you to just say the reason why we're getting them to just update our infrastructure. But I don't think that, honestly, a lot of that connectedness and the relationships that our kids feel has to do with the people that are around them, like President Montoya Cordova said, and their sense of how they feel, and not really about the machines. I think it's about the relationship and connectedness amongst the people that are around our children, not the machines.
Okay. Do we have a motion on this?
I will move for approval of district purchase or expenditure that equals or exceeds $250,000 for archive security system for schools.
I'll second. Josefina.
Let's have a roll call, please.
Peggy Mueller Aragon,
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes.
Barbara Peterson,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes, so our next item is just consideration for approval of the rest of the consent agenda items. Do I have a motion for that? I don't know how to say that.
I will,
Maybe our parliamentarian can actually get us a motion.
I will move to approve for the remaining consent agenda items.
I'll second. This is Josefina.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Peggy Mueller Aragon.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes.
Barbara Peterson.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes, so our next item, special issues, is consideration for approval of a district purchase or expenditure that equals or exceeds $250,000 for wearable crisis alert system. This is a discussion action. I'll entertain either a motion or we could go move into discussion first.
I have questions.
Okay,
If we're ready to have discussion.
yes.
Are you guys answering my questions? Okay. So some of my questions did get answered in the that I sent in prior, but this wearable device system that you're thinking of purchasing, it does not have a two-way communication. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. However, I will defer that we have two representatives from Centegix as well as Dr. Blakey and John Dufay.
Hi, board. We appreciate the time today. I'm Dean Olds with Centegix, and there's different ways of two-way communication. One thing about this is that we are actually giving the location, and the person who presses that button is being transmitted to those responders automatically. So you can see in Carly's hand right now, there is that badge. So when that's pressed, the location, and only when they press that button is location being transferred to those responders. And then there's also discrete feedback of vibration that staff member gets, letting them know that that message has been sent. So in the two-way communication, it is about they are confirming that the message is sent, and then the location information, which is usually the critical first verbal information that is needed, is being sent automatically, so no one has to talk during a time of distress.
Okay, so but does it have the ability, like if there is a time of distress and a signal gets sent to the office, say, and let me just take a real world scenario. If there was a gun threat at a school and some of the teachers were not on Google Chat, and so half the teachers would know that everything was okay, but the other half of the teachers didn't know. If they had this device, how would a signal get back to the teachers and the staff to know that everything was okay?
Absolutely,
Without
great
having to go over
question.
the intercom or having to go over, you know, like how does the signal get sent, but then how does everybody know everything's okay?
Yep, so absolutely. So the number one usage obviously is just someone pressing that button during a day-to-day, right? A medical, a behavior, a fight. However, that system can also go into a lockdown. So by repeatedly clicking that staff member's badge, that system will go into a lockdown that now is not just alerting responders that this person needs help and where they are and that this is a serious incident and letting the police know. It is also visually notifying all building occupants that they need to quickly take action. So you'll see there's a strobe in Carly's hand right now that would start flashing a specific color like red during a lockdown. Think of it kind of like a fire system, but for all the other things outside of fire. So that starts flashing. There's automated intercom announcements that go over. So instead of someone having to get on the intercom, instead of people that aren't near the intercom, they get those visual. It's a way for everyone to quickly know I need to get to safety behind a locked door.
Okay. Okay. Can you hold up, Carly? Can you hold up that is not how big the badge is? Correct.
No, that is, sorry. Yeah, that's the strobe. And just for reference, those strobes should be placed every classroom, hallways, right outside exterior doors. So those strobes are the visual way on top of the audible way that you are communicating with everyone to get to safety.
Okay, so you're showing me the badge right now. Okay.
That is the badge that
badge.
every staff member has.
Okay, and sorry, could you show me what like the front and the back looks? Okay, that's the front. And that's the back, okay.
And that would just fit right behind if existing staff IDs, it would just fit right behind and they can discreetly press it, right? So going back to that two-way, you don't have to say anything. If you have someone that's confronting you or you feel threatened, you can definitely press that button discreetly and get help.
Okay. So thank you for that. So I think now I'm moving back over here. I think one of my original questions was there is a mobile alert system that is available through PED right now that has been reallocated for the past 5 years or starting in 1920 and has been reallocated every year through the legislature, and it is being offered free to the districts. So I think a main question that, yes, I see that you answered in here, but I think that this needs to be answered in a more open setting. Why is APS deferring from a system that is free, that has been used with districts around the state to purchase a $7 million system instead?
I can answer, but I turned my camera. My internet is slow. I apologize. But I can see Charlotte and Renette. So if you can't hear me, then make a motion to me. That have is a little bit in what we use. So there's, can't hear me.
You're cutting out.
You're choppy.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
You're just coming in and out. So keep talking and we'll, but you're
Okay.
choppy.
If you ask the next question, I'll get on my phone instead and it might be better.
Oh, that's
Now we can hear.
That's
I have
better.
another question where, oh, it's better already?
Mhm.
So the other system doesn't allow for the same flexibility that this system does. It's very limiting because you have to use your phone as a device. And that means that your phone has to be on you. Not only does that prevent if you don't want to use a personal phone or device for that purpose, there wouldn't be an option to not use your personal device. And the second thing is you'd have to have your phone on you. A lot of times in those systems, as we investigated what schools were doing in districts around the country, it's limiting because if you don't have your phone, you can't get assistance. We had a principal that was assaulted in the fall. If she didn't have her phone with her, so she wouldn't have been able to use her phone for a system like this. As well as a lot of times, if you're like me and you have a lot of apps on your phone, you have to go on and find that app to be able to make the alert. And so in some ways, calling 911 is much faster than finding
Now you start
badge like this.
again.
Having a prevents a lot of those issues.
Okay. So I think, which kind of brings me to my next question. So the utility of the buttons, there was a mention of it, of how it's useful, that you can contact the APS police, APD, BCSO. Can you just kind of expand on that a little bit? And I don't mean to like belabor this point, but I think we just had a conversation about a layered approach to our infrastructure and school safety. And so I want to make sure that spending $7 million on a program is going to work well with the infrastructure we have, and that we're not just spending money to spend money, that we're actually, I'll leave it at that. So can you kind of expand on the utility of the buttons and how it will be incorporated into the infrastructure?
Yes, so part of what happened in the fall, we were doing a training with all of our legal or our law enforcement agencies. And honestly, as we were doing like the tabletop with all of the zone associates, communications, school police, APD, BCSO, we got stuck on the first part of the training that was a teacher needs assistance. What do they do? Who do they call? And so we knew from that point that we needed to find something that provided us the opportunity to be able to call for assistance, to be able to respond both locally and be able to respond to police in a severe incident. What we really liked about when we found this solution was that as a teacher and as a principal, the ability to use it on a daily basis just to call for assistance is really important. And so that utility, as having it as a layered approach to have staff be able to feel that if they are in an emergency or they see something that they need assistance with, they can call right away for help by pressing the button. That could be anything from a fight, an injury, you don't want to leave a student, and you see that there's a fight, you want to, ask for help for it in a classroom as part of our de-escalation training. We have also found that teachers, if they call the office through the intercom and they ask for blue team, to come to room 112, it often ignites more stress in the classroom and with the student. And with this solution, we'd be able to have the teachers just be able to press the button, alert the staff, and the crisis team could come and do de-escalation for that particular student. And so the flexibility and the uniqueness of this to be able to not just be used in a situation that we don't want to happen at any school, but to be able to be used as a communication tool for our staff to feel that they can call for assistance. Like I said, the principal that was assaulted in the fall would have been able to, get assistance right away from pressing it. So we felt that leveraged the ability to improve our communication with staff and with principals, police, and all of the responders that we need in cases of emergencies.
Okay, awesome. I think that just brought up one last question that I have. Who's monitoring this? Like, have we decided, or have you guys decided yet, when the signal goes in, is there a central person in the office who will be monitoring? Or is there a component of this that is the monitoring system?
Yes, so the schools will be able to have the ability to list who they want to be on the call list for the cases that I talked about, like the school cases, as far as maybe they want the nurse, the crisis team, the principal. It's up to the school to identify who those people are that they want to be notified if a member presses the button 3 times. If a teacher or a staff member is pressing the button multiple times that it is a 911 emergency, then that call will go to our dispatch center, and it'll be the equivalent of calling 911 at a school.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Blakey.
You're welcome. I apologize for my choppiness.
Okay. Board Member Dominguez.
And what kind of lifetime warranty is on this system? Or is there, what is the warranty on the system and support that comes with? And what's the life expectancy of? I mean, I can see these badges, getting worn out. Not for, I mean, just for a number of reasons, right? I mean, we work with kids and we're actually.
Go ahead.
So the system is under warranty the whole period. And one of the things we've learned over time is you guys just want that solution to work without having to have all the resources and maintenance in place to do it. So that is part of our agreement, is that we are the ones maintaining it. That includes the batteries. That includes replacing them if a battery is going low on any of the devices. So that is all covered as part. So low batteries, if a badge starts to have a battery that goes low a couple of years from now, that's replaced at no extra charge to the district.
For how long?
Or
as long as this system is in place in agreement.
Okay. And our current
Go ahead.
And our current contract is 5 years.
That is correct.
The pricing that we're being asked to approve.
That is correct.
Okay.
Board Member Mueller-Aragon.
So after the 5 years, then what is the cost going to be after the 5 years? Estimated cost, if we decide to continue.
You could continue just kind of at that same pace. It depends if you guys want to use the same equipment or if it's, hey, there is something, a newer version of this that you would like to do 5 years from now. But that is usually, it would just kind of keep at that same pace for future years, including the maintenance and warranty and everything.
Okay, so then, and I know I always ask for specificity. So that $7.3 million cost, you said it's for maintenance, it's for the batteries, right? And what else? I know the resources. So what are you counting as resources?
Yep, absolutely. There's a lot of devices. So I believe a board member earlier asked about how do we make sure it works everywhere on campus? We don't rely on your Wi-Fi. We don't rely on cellular signals. So we do build a network technology and create an umbrella over your whole campus. So it works outside, inside, practice fields. To do that, there is that infrastructure that we put in place that is installed. So when we talk about that price point, it is us coming on site. It's installing all these devices, putting the visual strobes everywhere. And doing that, it is training. We train every administrator at every site. We go and work with the team there, the administration team, to make sure they know how to use it. They know how to respond. There's a lot of district level training as well. And then it is the maintenance, it's the software, it's the badges. Every part of that is included in that price.
Okay. And then so when you're setting up all this infrastructure, then when a teacher or staff member presses the button 3 times, that's how because you've already done all that work, that's how it knows to go to dispatch to APD or APS police. That's how
right. It works. Yeah, we don't need to worry about like GPS, right? Things that you're used to on your phone to get to a school, but aren't very good at telling you what floor or room. So that network, that technology we put in place, it allows you to know you're in room 202 when you press that button and share that. And that's how they know to come directly to that place. Part of that training is we have a special mode the system goes in that when every staff member is given their badge at the first part of it, they actually get to press that button. That is recorded. You make sure they know how to press it. They get to feel the vibration after they press it. That way we want everyone to press it for the first time, not when they're in an incident or emergency. We want to do it during that training mode, and that is part of it as well.
Okay. And so I know to one of the questions that was asked, it said that this device would not necessarily improve school safety, but improves the ability to respond quickly. And makes the staff comfortable so they can call for help at any time. So and I don't know who would answer this question, then is it still a layer in our school safety infrastructure though? And that's probably doesn't go to you. It probably has to go to one of
Blakey.
Dr. Blakey or.
Yes, so yes, it definitely is another layer in our safety protocols. It includes being able to, like I said, when we did that training, part of the safety is being able to have a system within the district that is clear and that people know what to do in the case of an emergency. So that is part of our system that is really important in our ability to respond to situations as well, is making sure that we have a unified approach to district response and how our staff know to call for help. And so it definitely is in the layered security approach that we have for how to respond to emergency situations.
Okay, so it really is about getting a quicker response. So then this is just maybe a really silly question, but how easy is it, like, you create fake IDs, how easy is it to create a fake wearable crisis alert system?
It's a closed system, which means you just can't activate it with another device you clone. We are encrypting the technology from end to end, meaning it's a closed network. We're not allowing new devices outside of Centegix to join that network. So we make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen, that people are trying to duplicate it.
Okay, because that's always a concern about somebody coming and, there's always bad actors out there that want to do something for not a good reason. So thank you.
This would be a really hard way to do it. And the good news is if they did, it would be showing you exactly where they are when they press it. But that has not happened ever in our 4,000 sites.
Yay.
Board Member Peterson, sorry, I had a little brain lapse there. Board Member Peterson.
I'm going to support this because the procurement policy has been followed. It's been researched. I think over the years, the district's done a good job of not just jumping to every quick device and do knee-jerk things that look superficially helpful that aren't helpful. And so I'll support it, but it actually makes me pretty fundamentally angry that we are between this rock and a hard place for how we keep schools safe and how we keep our kids safe. And that somehow still as a society, as a community, we're not saying, we still cannot take a stand that maybe there shouldn't be a plethora of guns out there that anyone can get a hold of. And that we are still overall, not just within APS, but as a community as a whole, not investing in a healthy community, in a healthy society. And so we end up picking up the pieces and trying to keep a Band-Aid over the safety for our kids when we haven't invested in what we need to invest in. And I would like to see, I would really love to have the district put together how much money has been spent on various security systems, safe entryways, fencing, all of that we've had to do so that we can at least pretend that we're doing something to keep kids safe instead of putting the money into program. Because I think the community really needs to understand that there is a cost and it is at the expense of our students, that this is where our money's going instead of into what we know they really need.
I have just a
Remember
follow-up to
Denise.
this, to what you're saying. Because for a moment, I envision lots of people pressing that button, and guess what? We don't have the personnel to respond. And in part, and it goes back to what you're saying, and this is not a reflection on our district. It's a reflection of where we get our money, and that's the state. We can't attract personnel because we're not paying them $40,000 to start, to be a staff member, and to help with this. So, yeah, I like the idea the system. But I'm hoping that we're not getting lots of,
Trinkets.
well, lots of buttons pushed and, you know, those poor administrators in the front office are trying to respond. But there has to be another way, right? We have to invest in teaching our kids, because Superman ain't coming. This is our reality. So it's up to our community here at school to find a way to help kids talk to each other and talk honestly about what they're feeling and learning how to resolve conflict in productive ways. This is a great system when those sorts of things break down, but yeah.
Absolutely. Board
And
member.
Also, just
Board
one-
Member Peterson, in response to your comments, and I appreciate your comments, and there are certainly a lot of things going on. This particular solution, one of the reasons that some of our colleagues that we've worked with across the Council of Great City Schools and other districts have pointed out is helpful is because it actually, when you don't have staff, it helps to utilize people in the right way by identifying who gets called and being able to make sure that people have access to ask for assistance when they need it. Schools have asked for years. When I was a teacher and a principal, everybody wanted their own radio to call for assistance if they need anything. And that, wasn't a feasible option. However, having this is actually a way to help staff build up their confidence that they know what to do if a student needs help or one of their colleagues needs help. And it's not just in a violent situation at all. And that's one of the things that a lot of schools have pointed out, that they've been able to quickly give aid to students who have medical emergencies, but on the playground when they're far out, they're able to call for assistance to get the nurse out there. I think there was a district where they actually were able to save a student's life by being able to call for assistance quickly in a medical emergency. So it's really giving staff the ability and hopefully actually building up staff efficacy and how they feel they can respond to anything on campus in their classroom. If they need assistance, somebody will be there to help them and not feel so isolated in a classroom or on a field where they can't get assistance if they need to. So although it can be used in 911 emergency situations, also we probably will see it being used mostly is in everyday everyday activities that happen at a school and staff need assistance.
Board Member Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Blakey. I also just wanted to both respond to and build on a little bit of Member Peterson's comments, because I agree. And you use the term rock and hard place. I think it's a false choice. And I think if we're going to be true to the goals and guardrails that we approved, then it's incumbent upon us as leaders to demand a solution that's aligned to those goals and guardrails. There are trade-offs in all of these budgetary decisions, and I'd be interested in seeing what are the trade-offs. If you have $8 million and you're going to invest it towards a goal of improving communication or improving safety or improving response time or whatever the goal may be, what are alternative ways in which we could spend that $7 million or 7.5, over 7 million, acknowledging all of the contextual factors within our system, the limitations on staff, the size of our campuses, all of these other factors. I think I would much rather entertain proposals related to training staff on how to respond, how to support each other, how to really and truly foster school environments that are focused on safe and supportive climates, so that we're not having these problems that we're addressing. So it's much more of a proactive strategy, I think, than a reactive strategy. And acknowledging that, yes, proactive activity and reactivity are both part of the bigger picture. But I think from where I sit, I'm honestly a no, because I'd like to understand a little bit more about trade-offs that are made and what is the real goal of this. So I just wanted to thank you, Member Peterson, for putting that on the table, but also just acknowledge that.
Board Member Jackson, you had a couple more questions?
Yeah, no, it was a contract question, actually. So this is a 5-year contract, and I'm wondering, kind of based on some of these questions and ideas that have come up, is there a like a termination clause within the contract that if after 3 years we have determined this just is not working or is causing, we're getting all sorts of clones, I don't know. Is there a termination clause that if the school's decided it just doesn't work, we don't have to pay $7.5 million?
Board Member Jackson, yes, there is. There's a termination clause for cause and a termination clause for convenience. They do have timelines built within them. And also if there's any breach of contract, they do have a period of time to rectify any of those breaches. But yes, both of those clauses, I believe the largest cost is upfront to bring in the equipment. And then it's more of an annual maintenance. There's a breakdown of those costs over the 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I had just a follow-up. If you could just let me know when it comes to like false, I'm just thinking about at the elementary level, when the kids, I taught kindergarten and they're how kindergartners are. How many false alarms do you think you would have at that level? I'm sure that you have that data.
Yeah. Overall, when we look across sites all around the country, it's less than 5%. And again, less than 5%, most of those are going to be that staff alert day to day, meaning you're letting a principal know to come down to that room.
Okay. And then to go back to Member Jackson's, so tell me what the reasons to get out of the contract are. Cause. So what would be cause?
So cause could be different things as far as not meeting, not the system itself is not working as required.
Not working as APS
Yeah,
thinks it should be working.
Yes, also non-appropriations.
Okay.
So the contract, we pay for the equipment when it comes in. There's an annual maintenance agreement. And then based on appropriations, or we also have a termination for convenience if they chose not to renew that contract for the next year. So it can be appropriations, it can be anything with the equipment not working as planned, but usually if there's a breach in the contract also, there is a period of time for them to fix the breach.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I just have a couple of comments. When I was the director of school health and was working with school nurses across the state, I know that this was a huge issue around that medical emergency, and depending on where the nurse is when that emergency is occurring. And it's not that there's not willingness of staff or there's not a ready, but you almost need, you need a button. You need to be able to get people to you, especially if in our district where, would be great with 7 million, maybe we could get a school nurse in every school, which could be really helpful, that we'd have one that's not having to go from school to school or sharing schools. But the health assistant sometimes is the person that's left behind, who is there, who's having to respond to a medical emergency. And it just depends on the complexity of it. Also, the reality for our district is just the complexity of the medical conditions that APS is having to address with the kids that we serve with disabilities. I remember the nurses often saying that our nursing complexity and APS is what you would find in like a peds NICU, because we do have kids that are suctioned, that are on tubes, that are doing all kinds of different things. And so sometimes there are medical emergencies that arise with just those children, and it's hard to get to them quickly. And it's not, I don't think it's, I agree, that it would be great in a perfect world that a small community that somehow it can work. But I think of the complexity of the size of some of our schools, especially our high schools, where it's all laid out in a really, big, complex way. I wish we had $7 million to pay for more hands-on staff, that could pay for all of the pieces that we need to support. Oh, I don't know, whether it's the social workers, more peer-to-peer workers, things that could help us with, just climate and culture. I would guess, and as Mr. Olds, you had mentioned that you've got 4,000 sites. Is that what you said?
Yes, ranging, we're in 3 of the top 10 in the country, the largest districts, but really it's anything from a small one-site district all the way up to our largest, it's almost 400 schools.
What I was thinking is that it could also help us study the gap, right, in terms of places. And I'm hoping that the district would want to take a look at that, because those places where we have like an overabundance of emergent calls or things that really are higher at a greater peak than others, hopefully it sounds like you collect a lot of data, so it would be able to tell us that. And maybe that would help us as a board also to know how to direct resources to a particular area or part of the state or part of the city where maybe there's an urgent or emergent need that is different, right? That we would probably have to do. I would love to see us be able to like work ourselves out of this, right? I mean, I think it's like, could be a first step, maybe collecting the data, giving us some ideas of things that we could layer differently. But if we start to layer it differently and we're seeing that a school has a low response with it or not really a utilization of it, that also could tell us something there as well, that maybe that particular school really doesn't need this level of this layer. Maybe that layer doesn't work for that particular school. It might be not indicated for all of our schools, but just for some of the schools. So I'm interested in how you collect that data, report that data, and have school boards utilize that data to sort of make some funding decisions differently as they're moving through.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very common now that this data, which when someone closes that alert, after that alert happens, was it a medical, a physical altercation? We're starting to hear of de-escalation, right? They want it closed as a special reason for de-escalation. Runners. So we are now having that. A lot of people report that data to the board in whatever fashion your process will allow. But to your point, it does also identify trends. And some of those are positive, some of those are negative. If it's hey, wow, we have a lot of runners at this school between these hours and they're always getting off and it's a busy area, we can already be proactive in making sure we have someone on site. We don't create new incidents, right? That's very important. When I think someone mentioned, is there new tasks we're putting on our principals? We're not creating new incidents. We're giving you a faster and more efficient way to manage the incidents that are already happening, right? So now as those things are happening, you can start supporting your staff. So now if there is something where you're going, why is it taking that many medical incidents? Do we need to put an additional health person in that cluster of schools or in that school directly? This is all the data that you will now have. And one last mentioned, I will say this, your district did a very good job in the contract negotiation with that termination for convenience. Ultimately, that is not something we normally do, but it was very important for you guys to say, hey, if this doesn't work for our district, if it doesn't work for our public, we want a way out of it. And that means the cost is not $7 million. It's only 1 year's worth of stuff. It's only 2 years. This is not a 3-year minimum. This is a 1 year that your district did negotiate into that contract.
Okay. It sounds like if the data is built into that, that could be really useful to the district and to the board for some decision-making and ways that we could potentially utilize our resources in a much more effective way too, to also add the additional layers of support that maybe are coming up for specific schools, and if it's not being utilized in a school, it's not, doesn't seem like it would be indicated for that particular school. So I'm just curious about that as we move forward. Do you have another question, Board Member Jackson? Yes. Okay.
It's one more contract question. And first of all, kudos to you guys. I'm so thrilled that you negotiated that. So I'm going to assume that you've also negotiated this, but I just wanted to ask the question. Let's just say for some reason it doesn't work. Like they the button gets pressed and, you know, we push this through and it just doesn't work. Have you negotiated that the company would indemnify or warranty the district for any of the consequences that of us relying on this system?
Okay, Chairwoman Jackson, we did have also our legal counsel involved in the negotiations because liability clauses for a system like this are very complicated and very difficult. And there was a lot of back and forth. There are some indemnification included in that, but there are also limitations. I believe we negotiated a higher rate of liability on the insurance than is normally asked for. I believe we asked for an additional 5 million, and if for some reason their insurance wasn't in place, they would also have a clause to cover that for the first 5 million of costs. So,
Job, you guys.
All right. Any other discussion?
Board President, I just wanted to quickly state that in regards to your comments and your questions, you know, the funds that we're using to pay for this cannot be used on personnel. And then because of that, this does give us the ability of what you were asked about in the limited personnel we do have. How can we leverage funds that we can't use for personnel to be able to use data to show us where we can put personnel? And so that is, you know, kind of a way that we can work to utilize restricted funds in a way that will leverage what we can do with the personnel funds on the other side of it. So our hope is to really dig into the data to find things such as counselors, nurses, all of the things that we're looking at and where we can make sure that we're utilizing our staff in the most efficient way with limited resources.
That makes sense. I'm looking at that because you clearly outlined that it would be ESSER for year 2. It looks like ESSER's years 1 and 2, and then 3, 4, and 5 was capital. But definitely our capital funds are also critical for us for lots of other reasons. But I appreciate the clarification. Thank you. Any other discussion? Dr. Bowman, were you on the cusp of saying something? It just looked like you wanted to say something.
I was going to pick up.
Oh, you're going to pick up your phone. All right. So I will entertain a motion on this.
I motion to approve. Let me get rid of my note. This expenditure for wearable crisis alert system that was just discussed.
Second. May I have a roll call, please?
Peggy Mueller Aragon.
Probably it's going to be no. I just think that we can use this money to really improve school safety. I just think we can use it in a different way. That was a hard decision.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Ditto. No.
Barbara Peterson.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. Okay, we'll move on to our next item, which is item B, an update on the district's investment program for the third quarter of FY 2023. This is a discussion, and Mr. Mark Turnbull, Executive Director of Accounting. He's coming up to the table here with a friend.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is an update on the district's investment program for the third quarter of FY 23. For this update, I have Deanne Woodring from Government Portfolio Advisors. She is our investment advisor, and she will take over.
Deanne Woodring with Government Portfolio Advisors. I've been your advisor for almost 5 years now. It's nice to be in front of you. And we've been hard at work, and I wanted to be in front of you personally just because of what's going on in the markets and to report, number one, portfolio is very, very safe. Number two, we're earning a lot more money because interest rates are much higher. And number three, the portfolio was positioned very well to make those adjustments and do that. So that's what we want to do, is have an agile portfolio that's able to move when rates move. Done that. So you have a presentation in your books. I'm going to jump forward. I'm not sure the page number for you, but it's the one that talks about historical rates. So let's move. I'm going to right there. So on this page, it talks about what's happened to rates, and where this is important for you is you have a lot of money. And our goal with your money is to make sure that we're optimizing the balance. Number one, always keeping it safe. Number two, providing for all the payments and cash flows that you need. And then number three, optimizing in investments that you're allowed to do to achieve a market rate of return. So back in a year ago, you were earning about 0.5. Actually, you're earning less than that. You're earning 0.2. And that was because that's where interest rates were. And a lot of your money was in the bank at Wells Fargo. And we did have some of it invested in your certain dedicated reserve funds and some operating funds. Today, the interest rates are at 4.69. So that's up 400%. I mean, 4%. And that impact is significant for the portfolio. The next page shows you the rate changes. And the key is that they're moving all over the place, and they've always moved all over the place. I've been in the market since 1982. I started and they were 18%. So what we're trying to do for the district is to make sure that we have strategies and balance in all those buckets to be able to achieve the earnings that you can, to make sure you're making as much as you can while still keeping the safety and liquidity in place. Someone asked this, and I got a question from Mark on, because they've changed so much, is there something different that we should do? And there really isn't. I don't like to change strategy just because rates are moving. I like to have a good, strong strategy going into it. And the way that we balance your strategies, we have a cash component or a liquidity component to each of your funds, and then we have an investment component. So we met earlier today, and what we'll probably do is just twix a little bit and add a little bit more to the investment component, always meeting that liquidity needs. Because the other thing that happens when rates go up is the value of your bonds go down. So we never want to have to sell your bonds to provide for liquidity. So that's that kind of push and pull that we're working on to make sure that those are balanced and real comfortable with how you're positioned. The main components that we did, and I think the biggest work that Mark and I recently did, was we did talk to your custodial bank, transferred your assets from Wells Fargo over to Principal. Principal and Wells both had pretty low deposit earnings rates. So we talked to your providers over there and moved a large amount of the money from being in a bank deposit, which was convenient right now with what's happening with bank deposits, into a money market fund, and a government-only money market fund, which is allowed under your directives and your procedures. A money market fund invests in treasuries, agencies, and repos that are in treasury. So again, very secure pooled assets. And it's also allowed Mark to be more efficient in moving the money around. So they're in their daily liquid. So tomorrow he could pull out as much as he needed. So that interest moved you up from like a 1% on that component up to almost 4% immediately. So that was where that impact came in. So the next page shows the diversification of the portfolio. This is across capital projects. It's across your debt service and your operating and self-insurance. You have a total of about $370 million in that cash component, which comprises of the money market fund and the state LGIP. State LGIP is always also up over 460. Your overall book earnings yield today is at 410. And again, that is up from almost 0.28 last year, which is significant. And I expect it to come down. So we have not been this high for 15 years. So again, the portfolio is positioned very well to adapt it. And there's really nothing that we're going to push to change that. We're going to take the benefits of that through this interest rate cycle. I want to go back one page. The operating fund, our strategy in that is to take excess balances you're not needing for daily cash and invest it out a year right before fiscal year end, because you need that cash over fiscal year end. That investment was invested at 415. We'll probably increase that investment a little bit up to about 75 million. Again, it's always readily available. It needs to be readily available at the end of the year. Your overall balances increased from 484 million to 547, mainly in your capital projects funds. And that earnings difference across all the accounts is about $9 million. So it's significant. In the operating fund, we looked at last year, this time you had earned $62,000. And because of that rate, you're up to 3.6 million. So that's pretty fun. That's great. And it's the power of money. It's the power of the size that you have. And then what's happened with interest rates and our diligence in balancing that around. Again, we're treasuries, agencies, money market funds, safe and short. Those are the keys. So right now we have 47% in the money market funds. Your maximum by directives is 50%. You have 17% in treasuries, you have 14% in US agencies, and 20% up at the state treasurer's LGIP pool, which is also invested in treasuries and agencies and money markets. And they do have some bank deposits, and their bank deposits are 100% collateralized. The next report shows the structure. So as I mentioned at the outset, we look at liquidity balances and investment components for each of the funds that you have, and make sure that those are balanced. And we're actually put triggers in our system so that we're watching the minimum balances on the liquidity. So I'll see it right with Mark when your balances start to come down for cash. If you go below 100 million in your operating funds, I'll know about it. We'll go, something's different than what we talked about. Why are you lower? And that allows us to make any adjustments that we need to do. I don't expect you to go that low. We have a good history on the portfolio. And then the self-insurance fund, we always keep a reserve in that as well for cash. So everything is very stable. And the key for you as the board is looking at the maturity structure of your portfolio. And your maturity is only about 3 months. So it's short. So you're protected within this market value move. We'll probably move that out just a little bit when we make investments, but we still keep you well right around under 6 months. The next page is the compliance page, which ties to your directives and looks at and I just repeated what the investment components are. So everything looks fair. I do have a correction. I have your money market fund in my compliance report under your bank deposits, not money market funds. So I'll be correcting that for your fiscal year end. I just caught that when I was sitting down. That's a coding on my system that I didn't catch. And the actual maturities, the longest maturity at time of purchase you had was in the reserve fund. And that was just about 4 years. That was done a while ago. So that's it. If there's any questions, or I'm just really excited and wanted to be in front of you to share with you that the portfolio is so very well, that you're very protected on what you have. And GPA continues to work diligently here in New Mexico. We work with the state treasurer's office, NMFA, Bernalillo County, Los Alamos County, Sandoval County, continue to grow down here. So it's always a privilege to be with you.
I just want to clarify, we're actually with Bank of Albuquerque.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I just.
Wrong bank, different bank.
Yeah, you moved from Wells.
Yeah.
Any discussion or comments?
Good to hear that we're in Albuquerque. Bank here.
So can you just like in a quick sentence, just summarize what your recommendations are?
My recommendations is we're going to continue to focus on the overall funds. And if there's an opportunity to invest in short treasury securities versus keeping your money in the money market fund, we will do that while meeting your cash flow needs.
Okay. And then you said we're at 47% for money market, but we can be at 50. We can get to 50, but we shouldn't.
I don't like to push it because your balances move. And when you get any closer, as matter of fact, try to reduce it
over.
Yeah, it's really easy to go over. If you spent down 50 million, then we would trigger that. And we're okay to do that by your directives. It's at time of purchase, but I don't like to be right
in case. Yeah, thank you.
A question.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm not a financial person at all, but I do watch the news. So my question kind of relates to like the issue that was happening like with Silicon Valley Bank, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the reason that they went under was because they had so much invested in treasury bonds. Is that correct?
They had so much invested long in treasury bonds. So they had invested out in the 5 and 10 year area.
Okay.
And they had locked in yields at 2% when rates were at 0.5. So they had gone out and used the yield curve to invest. And then he took the money from the deposits and either invested or they lent the money. And when they lent the money, they lent at 2%. So, and they were paying on the deposits 0.5. So then as interest rates on the short money, like I just showed you, the short money started going up to 4%. Everybody said, well, and we did that too. Why are you only paying me 1% when I should be getting 4%? because we should be getting what the market is paying. And then they said, uh-oh. And then people started taking their money to the money market funds or to other places that they could get 4%, and they had to get the money. And the only way they could get the money was to sell those bonds at losses, and they took over $20 billion in losses. And that started a roll on all these banks. We still have one more bank under a lot of pressure, First Republic. But a lot of those deposits were not collateralized either. A lot of these venture capital companies and VCs, I don't know what they were thinking, but they put their money in there and there was no collateralization behind it at all. So it was scary. The government stepped in and protected all depositors on that, but the banks are either being bought out. The FDIC will come in and have people buy the banks.
Okay.
But that's basically, they were here. They weren't managing their cash flow.
Okay. But so for our instance, we do not have long-term treasury bonds. We have short, because
your longest is shorter than 5 years. You can invest out to 5 years in your reserve fund. In my opinion, that's not long, but that would be the longest. And that is for a dedicated debt service reserve fund that is a long fund. So when we manage, your operating funds are managed short because they're short needs. So we tie the investment structure to what the needs are. Your capital projects are kind of in between that because those are 2-3 year projects that you're spending down. So we take the purpose of the fund and the cash flow needs and then match the securities to those.
Okay, perfect. And then you did mention that one of the funds was 100% collateralized, that some of the money that we invest with the state, and then you said something about it is 100% collateralized.
The state has bank deposits in their local government investment pool. So the state treasurer's office manages a local government pool that you're part of. And within those investments, they use bank deposits, and those bank deposits are 100% collateralized.
Okay.
And for disclosure, I oversee that fund, so I know exactly what's in there.
Okay. So I think with the kind of the volatility and you're seeing things going on at the bank, I just wanted to just have a conversation that our money is safe. We have a strategy as to how it's being invested, and we're not going to have to go to the federal government to have insured money.
No. And you own the federal government. You own treasuries issued by the federal government.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll add that our deposits at our bank are also over 100% collateralized.
Over 100% collateralized.
Yes, they target is like 105, 110%
Wow.
collateralization for any money we have in our checking, our checking operating account.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? No, thank you so much. Always learn so much on these finance conversations. Wish you could manage my money.
I know.
It's always nice to know when we write our checks, they will be paid.
Yes, that will be paid. Exactly. All right. Our next item for discussion is item C, update on the fiscal year 2023 budget and pre-planning for fiscal year 2024 already. Okay, thank you. Rosalinda Montoya, it's good to see you. And Miss Apodaca.
Pulling out all my stuff here. Madam Chair, members of the board, as you mentioned, I'm here to give an update on the fiscal year 2023 budget and the pre-planning for fiscal year 2024. So in this presentation, we will have an introduction by our Chief Financial Officer, Renee Apodaca, and then we will discuss where we are in our year-round process for this year. And then we'll show a graph on our enrollment. We'll go over preliminary projected revenue and expenses for FY24. We will show where we intend to use that additional funding that we've received. And we will display how the budgets are aligned to the goals. And we'll end with a budget narrative given by Renee. With that, I will turn it over to the CFO for the introduction to our FY24 budget.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Bowman. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the upcoming 23-24 operating budget for APS. I just want to just reiterate that this is discussion only. We're not going to be approving, and we'll be coming back for approval next month during the May Finance meeting. We welcome your comments, your feedback on this discussion. And as President Yolanda Montoya Cordova has previously said in other meetings, this budget is a living document. It serves as a starting point because we have to start somewhere. We have to get to a point where we can basically start the engine, and our budget is our best estimate. It's our best projection, how we ensure to align with the Board of Education goals, honor the guardrails, and support student outcomes. Additionally, as you are aware, we come with budget adjustments all throughout the year. So yes, it is definitely a living document with a starting point with adjustments every single month. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Montoya for her presentation.
Thanks, Renette. So if you go to the next slide, please, the next one. Next. Okay, so here, this is the one we show every presentation. It's just our year-round calendar. And really with our year-round calendar, we're always working in multiple years. So right now we are finishing up and projecting what will end in FY23. We're building the budget for FY24. And of course, we're looking towards how our budget will look in FY25 once the ESSER funds are gone. So in our year-round calendar, you'll see that we attended PED's spring budget workshop, and it was very nice seeing some of you at that workshop. And we've worked on what we are showing you here today. And so we have compiled the data. Next slide. We have compiled the data and checked everything thoroughly to ensure that all past legislation is included in our budget. The budget analysts have each uploaded the operational budgets for which they are responsible for into Lawson, which is the APS current enterprise resource planning system. And we will soon upload the capital and grant budgets. We will then convert that upload to OBMS accepted cost accounts. And once converted, the budget will then be uploaded into OBMS. So we will present the budget for board approval on May 24th, 2023. And once approved, we will post into OBMS for PED approval. Then once we have received PED's approval, then we can post the budgets into Lawson so they are ready for use on July 1. And I just wanted to clarify that when I say we've uploaded the budgets, I'm referring to the data that has been entered into our system. So it's entered, but we will not post until we want the funds to be available. So that's the difference between the upload and the posting. Next. So this again is just a reminder that our enrollment does continue to decline, but although our enrollment has continued to decrease and we are funded on our enrollment, we have had an increase in our revenue. This is due to the Public Education Department increasing the unit value in order for us to facilitate the changes that the state has implemented through legislation. Next. So we'll begin with our resources for FY23. The SEG was 800.6 million, and we had to revert 13.2 million. That was because not all of our schools participated in the extended learning time program, because at the time they were budgeting, giving us extra money for those that decided to go and do the ELTP. So let me see, we budgeted 15.9 million in other revenue, which includes the mill levy and federal and state indirect funding. And then for FY 24, the SEG is projected to be 903.1 million, which includes a 13.02% unit value increase. And we don't foresee having to revert any funds this year. So there's nothing in that box. And then our revenue is projected to be 18.3 million in other revenue. So, and this is mostly going to be due to the indirect cost funds that we will anticipate receiving from the qualifying expenses of the ESSER funds. So that brings our resources to 921.4 million. You'll see in FY 23 for expenditures going down to the next portion. We had 604.7 million going directly to the schools, 148.9 to departments, and 60 million for district-wide costs. And these district-wide costs support both schools and departments and include utilities, substitutes, and differentials. So we began the year with a $10.3 million deficit. You'll see that now our expenditures budgeted for in FY 24, the total for schools is 676.3 million, 173.7 million to departments, and 77.6 million for district-wide costs, with a projected deficit of 6.2 million. So we are starting FY 24 in better shape than we did FY 23. Next. Thank you. So this slide shows FY 24's projected budget resources of 921.4 million, expenditures of 927.6 million, giving us that deficit of 6.2 million. And we have multiple plans for how we can cover this. We usually, or we may have a unit value increase like we did this year, and that comes in January, which will more than likely cover that. But if that does not occur, we can use unexpended ESSER funds as our second option, or we can use any savings through vacancies or other unused funds to cover that. And of course, if that still didn't come to pass, we have a fourth option, and that's our last resort is to use some of our emergency funds, or what we sometimes refer to as cash balance or fund balance. Next. So I wanted to show a comparison of our adjusted budget, kind of how Renette was saying that it's a living document, and kind of show from where we started with our FY 23 budget and where we project to end with the FY 23 budget. So in the first column, that's FY 23, how we began with that $10.3 million deficit. The second column is where we project to end FY 23. And this includes that adjusted unit value increase, which brought our resources from 803.3 to 821.4 million, which helped us balance the budget. So the third column is the adjusted revenue, the revenue that we project for FY 24, which will be 921.4 million. So if you see the middle column and compare the middle column, which is where we're ending this year, to what we'll be getting next year, you'll see that we're projecting an increase of about 100 million. Next. So where did that 100 million go? So we had to do a lot of legislative increases, right? So the first one is salary increases. That it takes up 0.2 million of that 100 million. The 1140 instructional hours will take an additional 13 million. The EAs going to 25,000 per year will take an additional 8.4 million to cover that. And duty pay will take another 8 million. The at-risk index increased, which was an additional 7.7 million. ERB increase of 1% will cost 6.1 million. Subs increase of 3.7 million. Differentials, another 3.7 million. Our utilities costs have risen, and we are projecting that will be an additional 2.8 million. And of course, that's also to cover the additional extra days. And then we had an increase of 2.7 in instructional materials. The principal responsibility factor will cost an additional 1.7 million. The fine arts factor, 1.1 million. And then we budgeted 500,000 for compliance and feminine hygiene products of another 500,000, which brought that to 100.1 million. So that's where the additional funds went. And next. So next we're going to go into now, how does all this money support the goals set forth by the board? And as I had mentioned, we had sent these out with our templates, our budgets, so that the principals could give us this information. And so these are the results of all the compiled information. For the elementary schools, they aligned most, next slide. For the elementary schools, they aligned most of their operational money towards goal 1 in the amount of 73.5 million. They aligned 44.7 million to goal 4, 41.1 million to goal 2, 25.5 million to goal 3. And the next, I'm just showing it here percentage wise. So again, 37% went to goal 1, 22% to goal 4, 21% to goal 3, and 13% to goal. 21% to goal 2 and 13% to goal 3. Next. The middle schools align most of their operational funds towards goal 2 in the amount of 26 million, about 26 million, followed by 20.1 million to goal 4, 12.4 million to goal 3, and 3.6 million to goal 1. Next. Percentage wise, it looks like this: 37% of the funds went to goal 2, 29% to goal 4, 18% to goal 3, and 5% to goal 1. Next. Moving on to the K-8 schools, and they align most of their operational funds towards goal 2 also, in the amount of 6.4 million, closely followed by goal 1 at 6.3 million, 3.3 million to goal 4, and 2.9 million to goal 3. And next, percentage wise, that came out to 32% to goal 1 and an equal 32% to goal 2. I thought that was interesting. And then these other two are close also. 16% to goal 4, closely followed by 15% to goal 3. Next. The high schools align most of their funding to items related to goal 3 in the amount of 72.5 million, followed by 47.4 million aligned to goal 4 and 500,000 to goal 2. don't know if that was that was interesting. But then next, percentage wise, that was 57% to goal 3, 37% to goal 2, and a little under 1% to the goal 2. Next. So we thought we'd see what it looked like overall. So all schools combined, they aligned 115.4 million of the funds to goal 4. Closely followed by goal 3 at 113.3 million. 83.5 million to goal 1, 74 million to goal 2. Next. And percentage wise, that came out to be 28% of the budget is aligned to goal 4. 27% of the budget is aligned to goal 3. 20% is aligned to goal 1 and 18% to goal 2. So now I have completed the numbers portion of the presentation, and we'll turn it back over to Renette to give us some context to these numbers.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosalinda, for all your work on this and your department's hard work. This information that we presented to you, of course, is operational. And as you know, operational is about 90% salaries. So, in order for us to be successful to achieve the board's goals, we need to start the engine and we need that horsepower, right? Well, the horsepower are the salaries. So the salaries that Ms. Montero went over include teachers, EAs, administrators, custodians, police. We also have funding in there for substitutes, for some professional development, for supplies, for equipment, and then most importantly, for all the district expenses such as utilities and internet, because we got to make sure and keep the district going. There is other funding that we will be reporting to you when we come for the final approval of this. Funding is related to Title I and other grants, IDIB, ESSER, the other funding. And a lot of that type of funding, we do see that all funding must align to the goals and honor the guardrails. So we started to get some information on that funding, and I'm going to share some of the information that we are receiving. So like for goal 1, we have received information on high quality instructional materials that will be supported, such as foundations, also some 9 to 12 ELA materials and supplemental novels. There is funding for, I don't know how to pronounce this, but I think it's Heggerty phonics, if that's correct. And also professional development for goal 1, CNI teacher support specialists who will be providing training on letters that accompany the foundation kids. Also professional learning opportunities for adoption process of standards of high quality instructional material. Related back to the Heggerty phonics, there is professional development that is in both in English and in Spanish, and it is for pre-K to 3rd graders. There's also funding for support specialists, instructional support specialists, literacy support specialists, and there is also training in the science of reading and effective early literacy strategies. Additionally, we have obtained some information on implementing structured literacy with both printed and online materials, support for some reading resource teachers, and also online training for EAs. So we're able to see that funding will help support goal 1. As far as goal 2, we have high quality instructional materials in math materials and manipulative kits. We have professional development for iReady. also for elementary math support specialist. Continuing with the PD for math, there's PD for illustrative math, IXL math, also professional learning communities with MC squared out of New Mexico State University, and also secondary math support specialist. Additionally, there is online curricula related to iReady and also math resource teachers. For goal 3, we have obtained some information of computer science teacher support specialist, also new curriculum for advanced placement. You know, in order to fulfill goal 3, we have to make sure that there's opportunity for all the students to take the classes that we want them to take advantage of. So we have to make sure that there are classes in AP, in dual language, in classes to be able to get the certificate. So that is very important to have those to support goal 3. In goal 4, we have received some information on professional development in SEL, Hagen strategies, mathematical mindsets. We also have funding for behavioral support specialists, professional learning on SEL and AIM, coaching in classrooms on classroom management and positive behavior supports, development of SEL standards aligned to collaboration for academic, emotional learning, also curriculum and training for nonviolent crisis intervention, social emotional support, social communication support, behavioral management specialists. And we do have money assigned for monthly parent trainings, online training for EAs. So that is all related to goal 4. Also, we wanted to make sure that the guardrails were honored. So we had some examples of that. On guardrail number 3, that the superintendent will not allow curriculum and instruction that is not district and standards aligned. And you saw some of that in the adoption of the SEL that came earlier, and also the adoption of the math. Also, the superintendent will not exclude parent and legal guardian, student, and community. There were the community meetings that you all were involved in, and we were also there. Also, there was strategic plan community meetings, and there is instructional council meetings, where the superintendent will not implement programs and procedures without staff voice. Again, the instructional councils were very important for that. Also, all budgets have been emailed to teachers, and that was part of the negotiated agreement. So we are working very hard to ensure that our funding is aligning with the goals, honoring the guardrails, and most importantly, for student outcomes. So as I said at the beginning, this is, you know, our discussion, our discussion, so you can kind of see what we are doing, what we're putting together for the final presentation in May. So we stand for discussion, for your comments, for your feedback, for your recommendation.
All right. Thank you so much for all that information. I can tell you guys have had a lot of conversations, a lot of data, a lot of information coming your way. So I'll just open it up for discussion. Board Member Peterson, do you want to start? Do you have a question? You look like you're ready.
Let's see, one straightforward question is, I'm curious, what percentage of the department budget includes personnel that are actually school-based? Like, are nurses considered part of a department budget, or are they part of the school budget?
Board Member Peterson, we budget it all to the department, but in the presentation, we have pulled out the portions that go directly to the schools and include that in the school budgets. So it's kind of like a compilation of them, the two. But yes, the way we have it shown here, we pull out all the department staff and put them in that are directly related to school and include that in the school number.
Okay, so the department budget really is going to people who are not directly in schools.
Yeah, the department is just the part that's not directly in schools, correct?
Okay. And I think you answered it, that around 90% of the overall budget is salary.
Correct.
Okay. I know there's been a middle school task force that's been studying middle schools this year and really looking at what we need to do to make middle schools more appropriate and effective for our students there. Do you know, has there been much cross-pollination between that conversation and what's happening with the budget for middle schools?
I'm not sure I could speak to that myself, but I don't know if any of the associates would be able to speak a little bit more on that.
I don't think they're ready.
Thanks, Eugene.
No problem.
Mhm.
Board Member Peterson, Board President Montoya Cordova, Dr. Bowman. So the work that we started back in October with the Middle School Task Force ended about December, January. We have not brought those recommendations forward yet. We are working on a presentation that we will share with Budget Steering Committee so that we can look at that after we've worked with ATF and the principals in kind of putting together what those suggestions might be as we kind of move forward with that work.
Okay. Is there any way to pull that work together before we do the final budget approval?
I think that's possible. I think one of the things that we found in the budget discussion or the discussion with the task force was not necessarily financial so much. A lot of it was realigning how the schools operated around how they operated within the school itself already. So a lot of the work that the principals are doing now in the middle schools is really taking a look at their budgets and how they're aligning it to the goals and making sure that that answers some of the task force's requests. Right. So those principals are very aware of making sure that those things fit into place.
Okay, thank you for that.
No problem.
I look forward to having a presentation on that. I think it's important work, and it definitely would align with especially goal 4, I think, for making sure we're really appropriate with those students. Let's see. I know you mentioned Ms. Apodaca, a number of programs looking at social emotional well-being. Is there a specific designation that's focused on restorative practices? Because I think a lot of us have concern that we haven't really paced out a real implementation plan. I mean, leadership may have, but it hasn't really come to us. And so it's a concern I have.
Board Member Peterson, thank you for that question. In the information that I have currently, I cannot tie that together, but I will definitely follow up with that to be able to report that on our final presentation.
Okay, thank you. And looking at high school, just 2 more things and then I'll give up. High school, I know there's nothing designated for the first goal, or we couldn't see it, but high schools do receive newcomers that have very limited backgrounds in literacy. And so I don't know that I need a real answer right now. I just wanted to highlight that hopefully there is some acknowledgement that there's still a role in literacy development at the high school level, and that there needs to be continuous ongoing support for students that haven't gotten quite where they need to be for success. So that's the final thing, as well as I hope we can get a copy of the presentation. I really appreciate all of the work that went into it.
Yeah, I'll just go down the line.
So I think the excellent presentation, by the way, thank you so much. The one thing that kind of popped out to me was I noticed, Ms. Apodaca, when you were discussing some of the funding that was going to support goal number 3, I didn't hear mention, or maybe I missed it, of like CTE programs and specifically towards industry certification. I heard a lot of it going to AP, which I agree, and your analysis of it was spot on, but that is a two-pronged goal. And so I'm just wondering, was it just not pulled out for this presentation, or are we finding that the high schools are not actually allocating to CTE?
Board Member Jackson, no, as I had stated, we are still in the process of gathering data. And I reported on what I have received so far, but we are still actively putting this together.
Okay.
And I will make sure that the CT is addressed.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's part of the goal. So and that's not necessarily something towards you, but again, like a general statement that goal is out there. So our administration and schools need to remember that. And then I think for goal number 4, again, you were listing several programs, and this is where I will defer to Board Member Gonzalez because she has more expertise in this. But what I did notice is that seemed to be a lot of different programs, which I don't know the benefit of those, but we don't have a specific evidence-based and aligned tool designated yet for goal 4. So I guess I'm wondering when that aligned tool is going to come. And I don't think that's a you question, but shouldn't the spending on goal 4 align to the tool that we eventually get for goal 4?
Board Member Jackson, I know there is already a discussion and a ask for an aligned tool that has come to Budget Steering Committee. So it's definitely on our radar. I think the superintendent did talk about us probably having to go to a request for proposal. So that's why he didn't really want to elaborate a lot to not taint the process. But yes, it is on our radar. There's already discussion. And you're going to see that very, very soon.
Okay. Okay. And then just the third thing is you mentioned that you said all the budgets were sent to teachers. The budgets were sent to all the teachers. Is that what you said?
Board Member Jackson, yes, I was contacted by the union early, and they said that within a negotiated agreement, that was one of the things that the teachers wanted to see each school budget. So we asked the principals to ensure to send that out to be in compliance with the agreement.
Okay, fantastic. So we're being very transparent about how our money is being spent and where everything is going. Okay, that's wonderful to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to echo my appreciation and kudos to you all for the presentation, but also the frequency of the presentations. The fact that we're having these every month and that they're increasingly developing on each other is just tremendously helpful. So many thanks for that. I hope that our final conversation in May on the 24th is much less stressful than last year. So I really appreciate all the work that you've put into it for that. I'll start with the question that sort of builds off Member Jackson's question around goal 4, was just noting that when you had the add up of all of the schools, it was 28% or 115 million going to goal 4 as the highest, which seems high when there's not yet a clearly articulated strategy for how we would increase the percent of students who demonstrate the skills, mindsets, and habits most aligned to life success. And so I wonder what's going on there. I think frequently in education in schools, we treat everything else as SEL. So extracurriculars, field trips, anything else. And so I just would want to flag that. I think some of the programs that you mentioned in terms similarly can be piecemeal without a broader strategy for understanding how we're going to really work on those social emotional competencies and really embed it into the academic development as well. So I think that's just a flag for us in administration to keep our eyes on. I don't think it's necessarily any change required from a budget perspective, but that one did raise my eyebrows. That's not a question. That was a comment. The second, because Member Jackson asked the question. The second is the trend does not seem sustainable to continue to have expenditures that outpace our revenue. And so this has continually happened over time, and we continually begin the year with a deficit. I appreciate what you shared around the potential strategies for closing that deficit. And I think the confidence that the adjustment to the SEG is going to help with that, to the unit value. So that's good. But I am just concerned about that trend over time. And so I think one thing that would be helpful, and I think very in line with the Edunomics training as well, would be to see a 5-year forecast. And so I just would ask, is that feasible, possible? And it doesn't have to be anytime soon. It can certainly be after we approve the budget and after we, consider potential other changes that we want to make based on what's happening with ERS as well. But I do think seeing a 5-year budget that includes the big revenue drivers, which is obviously personnel, but broken out, salaries and benefits and whatnot, as some of the models that Edunomics has shared. And so the question is does that make sense from your perspective based on what you've learned, and what's the both feasibility and the time frame for when your shop might be able to get to a point of presenting 5-year budgets or 5-year forecasts?
So annually, we try to have the budget document, which does do the 5-year forecast and all that. We in the past have submitted that to ASBO for the Meritorious Award. And but a couple of years passed without the book. So this year we have worked on compiling 3 years of data so that we can be ready to roll that out again this next year. So you should probably be expecting to see that starting in October, November of 2024. We will have the budget book, which does have a 5-year forecast, and it has all the data with everything. It's kind of a bigger book of what you guys may have seen, the executive summary that we presented that one year. So we will be doing that.
Board Member Gonzalez, I agree in the studies that we have gone through Edunomics, and I'm currently one of the enrollees. That is very big on how they teach to be able to do the forecasting. So I agree with you. That's something that we have been discussing. So I agree that's something that we are starting to implement into our process.
Great, thank you.
And if I may, Board Member Gonzalez, one of the things this conversation has come up over the years, one of the challenges is that how does our finance department get a solid estimate when the state gives us a 1-year budget? And so much of our funding comes from the state. So the expenditures, I believe they can get fairly solid on, but then, when they kind of change things around and raise salaries and stuff like that, it makes it pretty tricky to kind of move out 5 years into the future. But I know they're working on it.
Thank you. Yes, and to that point, when we do the forecasting for 5 years, we do assume that the revenues pretty much stay flat or are going on the same trend, but we can forecast our expenditures pretty well, and we just kind of assume that that's going to cover it somewhat.
Well, I mean, and especially with the continued decline in enrollment, so being able to forecast that out, but also presumably eventually increases in pre-K funds, should we expand out on the early childhood strategy. So
yeah,
just appreciate your
parts. Yeah, and as we brought forward, the ESSER cliff and all that, so we are already thinking of that. We know that big substantial additional funding from the ESSER funds, the 247 million that we have, is going away at the end of this next year. And we do have some FTE on there, not many, that we're going to have to pull back, and some other expenses that we're going to continue having to support through operational, knowing that our decline is still going down. So we have been thinking about all that. Keeps us up at night.
I believe that.
I think you're next.
So to build on that line of questioning regarding forecast, I think it's been at least 20 years more that there's been a decline in our state budget going to education. And so has that in the past been part of your forecast as well? I mean, what we can almost count on is that raises aren't fully funded. And there's got to be some method to that madness, right? So is that also included in some way?
Yes, we have to consider everything, right? So, and we run multiple scenarios as to what if this goes down, what if that goes up. One thing that we do know, enrollment is going to be going down, and it seems to be a trend nationwide. We meet with Edunomics, and they have monthly meetings where all the districts get together and kind of speak to what's happening in their districts. And this is a trend that's happening nationwide. It's not,
Right.
Just us. So we know that this will probably continue to happen. So we know that there's certain things that we know as facts, and other things that we're kind of either have to keep flat, when we're doing our projections. And then we kind of, look at it, and does that seem right? We just have to run all those different scenarios and try the different things. If this went up and this one goes down, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the SEG, but even the funding from the state, all the different, and why we say projected here on our revenue, because we don't even know that for sure is our revenue. We haven't received our final 910B5 from PED. So what we've done is we've taken all the little parts that they've given us, the 0.5 of this has gone up to 0.55. This part has gone up to that. We put it all into this template, and we're projecting that that's what our 910B5 is going to say our revenue is. And so it's a lot of work, and even just figuring out what we're going to get this year. So it even complicates it, multiple years down the road. But yeah, it's a hard thing to budget or project, but we do our best.
Yes, you do. You work hard, and you're always prepared. Did I understand correctly that in previous years you mentioned an award for budgeting 5 years out? Is that correct?
Yes. So in prior years, we have submitted budgets, our budget in the budget book form to ASBO for this award, and they have received the award. It has not occurred for the last few years, I believe. And so that's why it was so difficult. We were trying to get it submitted this year for the FY23 budget, but along with all our other work and everything, we just could not get it done. So too many things happened, but we're close to at least getting it up to date so that when next year's budget comes, we can input that and be, because there is a deadline for that. And I think it is in October that we're supposed to submit that. And so hopefully this year we'll be able to get that in and get back on track with putting that.
Well, I think it speaks highly of the department, right? Because that's been the MO until a recent hiccup. So thank you. One more question, and it has to do in your listing of reading programs. And I am not an elementary school teacher, but in speaking with teachers and when I'm invited into elementary schools and I hear conversations, that's what has prompted this question. I'm not familiar with programs that serve special education children who have been identified with dyslexia. And so I don't know if or other needs, right? But it occurred to me as you were listing that we need to be aware of how we are addressing our special education kiddos, in addition to the newcomers. And actually, especially newcomers at that age.
Board Member Dominguez, yes, I will ensure to follow with that department to get that information for our final presentation.
And I will echo the other board members who have brought up goal 4. But I think that falls to us too, right? To clarify. To help clarify. So thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you all. I know you're working so hard and not sleeping very much probably. And so I'm going to start out right away with goal 4. And I see all these programs, and this school's using this program and this school's going to use this program. And, you know, it's a mismatch of all kinds of different programs. And since every school is different, one program might work better for one school than it might for another school. But I would just like some clarification about how that's just going to work and how it's going to really, if we don't have that tool yet, how are we going to find out if all those different programs are really going to align with the tool that ends up getting chosen? So I know everybody has I won't go into any more on that. So you already heard it. And I think you've heard this as well from Member Peterson, is when we're looking at, literacy at middle schools and also at high schools, we need to make sure that those needs are met for those children that didn't receive it for whatever reason at the elementary level. So I don't know how we can check on that to make sure that there are those programs at the middle and the high school level for those children that didn't get what they needed for whatever reason. So if we could do that, that'd be great. This is just a question, Ms. Apodaca, maybe, I don't know who would have the answer to it, but when you're looking at, we have this much money that's in this pot and this much money is in this pot, what do you see that looks different from last year to this year?
I would say that the work that's been done in the goals and the guardrails where people are talking the same language. Everyone is talking the same language and having that understanding that the student outcomes come first. And in order to support the students, we have to meet the goals. So I think it's really setting the tone for the district that everyone is speaking the same thing, regardless if it's operational or Title I or ESSER, we all have that mindfulness.
Because I just wondered if it looked at, are they going to put more money into this program than they did last year? I mean, I just wonder what that looks like,
And you're probably correct. There might have been some of that discussion as they're talking, at the school level. And unfortunately, we didn't hear a lot of that, but I would probably imagine the same also.
That we have to do this, so we have to put this money here. And so then I know that 28% went to goal 4, et cetera, et cetera. And so then there was it like 7% that was in other? I don't remember what the number was.
Yeah, for all schools, 7% went to other.
Okay. And so what was, I'm sure it was a myriad of things, right? That went to
It definitely was a myriad of things. It really, since this is our first year and we really haven't had training or like a starting point as to what to consider all this. Some people didn't think anything should go to other because they could somehow tie it into one of these goals, right? Where others felt like maybe a custodian didn't fit into any of these, or some are saying, yes, it does, because it helps, a good place helps them to learn better. So it was kind of, depending on what the mindset was of the individual that was building the budget. So I think that's why you're seeing some of that in other, because even though probably a lot of that money that's in other could really have gone to one of these goals, but without the training, as of this point, if they didn't know exactly how to relate it back to one of these, they just put it in other.
Because I'm wondering with like science, since that's not exactly one of our
Possibly.
goals, or they thought about music and art and they thought, well, maybe that doesn't fit in. So I'm just, that would just be interesting. Yeah, that would be, and that's where I would think it would go. But
Yeah,
I'm just
some would-
what, that's where some people would put it, but everybody might not do that. So that would just be interesting to me to see what they decided was other. And so I know that you did say that we're in a better shape this year as compared to last year. And so why do you think that? Is it just because we have a smaller deficit to deal with? I mean, what reason did you have for that? We have more money?
Well, I do feel that the state really, LFC and everybody has been working together, and last year they had, I mean, I don't think this is all of it, but last year they did ask me for all my data and how I calculated it and everything, especially with the raises. And so I gave them that data, and then I wanted feedback too. If I'm calculating this wrong and budgeting too much in some area that's not going to be used, I want to know also, but they never came back to me stating any errors in my work. But I think they may have learned from looking at that data, because this year for most cases, we were budgeted fairly closely to what the cost was going to be. The only one where we really saw underfunding was the EAs to 25,000. That one was the area where we were most underfunded. And I believe that it may have been because they didn't realize that all of our EAs are licensed. And so for our district, every single EA will now be at 25,000. Whereas I think they probably thought of it as a portion, right? That they saw all our EAs and thought probably 70% are going to be are licensed and the other ones are not. So we'll give them enough for that 70%. And I believe that that's the underfunding. I don't know exactly, but I would say that might have been the case.
Okay.
If I may, Board Member Mueller-Aragon, I wanted to respond to the previous question, then also to this one. So just to underscore what our budget folks are doing here, they took the goals and, as you know, they were recently approved and we try to communicate that out. But you point out a very accurate concern. So from a data perspective, what does it actually mean to say that these dollars are attached to this particular goal? And you're kind of pointing out, like, what is that? Is it really goal 1? Is it goal 4? Is it other? And I think what you have right now is we've done the best that we could, kind of given this really fast time frame and gotten folks used to the idea of saying, hey, you need to attach your dollars to a particular goal. But there is another body of work that we are going to have to undertake, which is to come to a collective understanding of what that attaching means, and then training and communicating that with all of our staff and all of everyone who touches that budget, so that they understand what it actually means, and then also share that with you all so that we all can speak the same language with respect to the allocations, because it might be that the other category should be really big. If we choose a very narrow definition of what is truly attached to a particular goal, or it might go to 0. I mean, if you say, like the custodian or the, whatever, like if you if you kind of say those are parts of the different goals. So that is kind of a real significant body of work and training and knowledge creation and dissemination that we're going to have to go through. So this is one of those things next year. A comparison of the percentages that we did right this year compared to the ones that we're going to be able to do next year is probably, it's not going to be an apples to apples, because we're going to be a lot better and more precise with that. So yeah, just wanted to share that piece.
And you have that on your tickler list so that you'll remember to do that next year?
It was the subject of many hours and intense conversations, and yes, it's not going away.
Fantastic.
I think it just from a practitioner point of view, lots of things that teachers do in the classroom are very much related to a literacy goal or a math goal. To the untrained eye, someone may come in and say, why in the world are you doing that? And if you take the time to actually talk to the practitioner that's doing it, there's a very viable and appropriate answer to that. So I think in developing the budget, it really reflects that too, that educators know that, for instance, doing a science experiment may not look like it's tied to literacy or a math goal, but very much is, because out of that, you're going to end up with calculations and writing up the report of what happened and all of those things. And so I think that there is a very legitimate push and pull for how specific it becomes, that sometimes takes the dialogue with the educator of why it looks like that. So that is not to say that there shouldn't be a standard, but how we develop those standards and guidelines should really be based on practice and that discussion of what impacts children. Culturally appropriate material may look like it's the extra out there, whereas in fact, it's very essential to one of the other goals. So I think it's going to be a real dynamic process. And I appreciate the fact that it's not just a simple, straightforward calculation.
And I mean, I think that we're going to always want to have the other, like, we don't want there to be like 0% in there too, but I don't know what we would think was the right number. What's the right percentage to have an other? I have absolutely no idea. I don't think there probably is one either. But is 7%, is that too much now? Is it going to be, I don't know.
I would lean towards doing something like getting a really precise understanding of what the connections mean, and then seeing what the other percentage looks like, and then try to increase the amount that's allocated to the chosen goals. So not necessarily a particular level, but looking to reduce the amount of other over time, understanding it's not going to ever go to 0, but at least it shows that we are spending more of our dollars towards the direction that the board has decided to go. So, yeah.
Thank you for all your hard work. I appreciate you.
Okay. And I was just going to add that what I would have imagined that happened if I was like a principal or if I was at a school site and I look at the goals, you try to say like, which is the one that I fit into the best, right? So I'm not surprised that that's the first glance that they do. It's like, oh, I'm high school, so goal 3 is really mine. This belongs to us at high school. And yes, the only goal really out of all of these that probably goes across all of them is 4. Because 4 does give everybody an opportunity, and it should be across the minds, across the board on a K-12 piece that we're trying to improve, the skills, the mindsets, the habits that are aligned to life success. So I would think the schools would think, I'm going to have a portion of that for sure. And if you take all that, it's going to add up, and that's going to be where some put some money in there. So it went up higher that way. But I think as, the part that is difficult, and this is on us as the board, as Board Member Dominguez has said, is that we don't have a lot of clarity on that goal, because we still don't have a tool. We don't have some articulated interims for it. So it's really been hard. And I think it's our first stab, and everybody's taking their best shot at it. But I'm not surprised that it was high, because I think it's the one place where every school probably felt I have to have some skin in the game on that goal 4, because it's the one that is definitely, I would imagine they're probably all thinking we probably have 2 goals. We should be addressing 2 goals, our main goal and the other goal. So that's good. But I also just want to circle back, because I think Ms. Apodaca, you said something really important at the beginning, is that our budget is also made up on the operational side. 90% of it is staff. So even on that SEL side, it's a staff person somewhere that's assigned, that has been given some sort of, I guess, a value, if you will, around to the work that they're doing, and it's assigned to that piece. And it's probably was a vision or a thought from at the local level, is like, well, they're not teaching math, they're not teaching English, they're not doing those pieces, but they're doing maybe some of the other things that are connected to what brings the students together: art, music, counselors, nurses, all of the other pieces that were attached to that. So in that particular side of it, that what was budgeted there, it's probably, it would be interesting to see what's the percentage, or what are the types of staff that are attached to that, because I think that will really help us also understand. So what are the trade-offs, I guess, or you will, is like where they're putting that staff to account for the work that's also supporting students around that piece. And you're right. I mean, Board Member Gonzalez, you're pointing out, it's probably all the extracurriculars and, those pieces that are attached to that. But I think if we have well-rounded schools, right? I mean, I think the goal is that we're going to have well-rounded schools. And if they're all operating from that, that whole child perspective too, once we do have a tool, and we're doing that because that SEL side of it also belongs in goal 1, goal 2, and goal 3. I mean, there's a portion of that that's also should be brought into the work that's being done as we teach ELA, math, and career readiness. So I just wanted to point that out, but I just wanted to say thank you too. I know, having watched budget development over the years, this has been really helpful. And what I really just want to say and express my gratitude for the flexibility you 2 women have brought to this process, because you have really engaged in this process and the conversation, and really have stepped up, if you will, to wanting to help us to realize and visualize a budget that really makes sense around these buckets and things that we're trying to do. So I just really appreciate all the hard work that I can imagine the conversations you guys are having. I would love to be a fly on the wall sometimes, because I'd imagine that it's like, oh my God, we're either on target, oh my God, what are we going to do? So I hope that we've created, a sense of reassurance too from us, because I think you need that from the board as well, that I acknowledge that you're moving in this great direction that's giving us a sense of like, okay, we understand where we're going. And I really appreciate that you have wanted to walk this walk with us. So thank you so much. All right. So thank you. I think we're moving on. It's always the last one. All right. So our next Finance Committee meeting will be held on Wednesday, May 24th, 2023 at 5 p.m. in the John Milne Community Boardroom of the Allison Bruce King Educational Complex, and it'll also be held virtually at www.aps.edu. So we're adjourned for this portion of the meeting, and we are now going to go into part 2. I know, this is always so much fun. All right, so So we're at the special Board of Education meeting, and I want to call this meeting to order. So can we have a roll call for the special board meeting agenda?
Yolanda Montoya Cordova,
Here.
Peggy Mueller Aragon,
Here.
Danielle Gonzalez,
Here.
Barbara Peterson,
Here.
Josefina Dominguez,
Here.
Courtney Jackson,
Here.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
All right, so now I have to remind the board members that if we've got some consenting items, so before we make that motion, I need a motion that if there's any changes that we need on this, let's make sure we have those.
I will move that we adopt the April 26th, 2023 Special Board of Education meeting agenda.
Oh, that's what we're doing first. Yes, I'm sorry.
Second.
I'm moving right ahead. I'm trying to get done. All right. Let me have a roll call on the agenda. I'm sorry.
The removal of the ones that we had voted on separately, though, I'm assuming.
We'll do that when we get to the consent. So we're just adopting the agenda. Okay, so
Peggy Mueller Aragon.
I always get this confused.
Did you have a second?
Yes, Josefina second.
Thank you. Peggy Mueller Aragon,
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez,
Yes.
Barbara Peterson,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes, okay, so now we're going to the consent agenda, and this is consideration for approval of the items approved by the Finance Committee. So this is where if we're going to move items, I'm looking at it, it would be items 3, 5, 14. And
The consent, just everything approved.
Yeah.
Didn't we?
do we just approve them, that is, or do we have to take them off? I always get confused.
No, I think.
But we took them, because we took them off and voted on them separately.
But so now they're
But
all
they
on the
are-
consent
But
for this.
now they're all on consent.
Okay.
So during the Finance Committee, your dissent on the ones is noted. So on this, we're just
Okay.
consenting that these were the items that were on that agenda and they
Okay.
passed, or yeah, they passed. Okay. All right. Thank you. Parliamentarian, need your help here. All right.
I just nodded.
Okay.
So we
That's right.
move, are we moving? Are we
Yes.
Motioning to
You move.
approve adoption of the consent agenda.
Of items approved by the finance committee.
Mhm.
Items approved.
Yeah. Approval of items approved by the Finance Committee.
I'll second.
Okay, now we'll have a roll call. I always get
Mueller
this.
Aragon,
Yes, I think.
Yeah, of items approved by the finance.
Danielle Gonzalez,
Yes.
Barbara Peterson,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes, okay, so the next Board of Education meeting will be held on Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023 at 5 p.m. in the John Milne Community Boardroom, Allison Bruce King Educational Complex, or virtually at aps.edu. And the next special Board of Education meeting will be held on Wednesday, May 24th, 2023 at 5:15 p.m. or immediately following the Finance Committee meeting, also here in John Milne and also online at aps.edu. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
It is lovely to